Welcome, y'all. It's Wes DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. I am sorry for the terrible view. I left my little stick that I film with on the tractor. I'm down here in the food plot that we just got through planting corn in right behind you, around four and a quarter acres. We're getting a food plot in. We have rain coming within the next 12 hours. Rain will be here, calling for about 1 inch and 2/10. So it's a good time to put a food plot in the ground. I told many of you I was going to try this release system for you guys. This is kind of goes against my grain because I have a food plot system that works really well in my area of Western Kentucky. I've not ever had to use this product before, but a lot of you are curious about the release system, and I thought I've got a little corner here. We've worked this ground because this was that volunteer Roundup ready corn from last year. The deer did not eat all of it, so we had a lot of issues with that volunteer corn this year. I wanted to go ahead and leave this spot off, and we're going to plant this in the summer release system, and we're going to give this a go. A couple reasons why I like this side. There has always been a bachelor group of bucks right here. Always. Since I have leased this farm for 3 or 4 years, there has always been a good solid group of bucks that are down on this end of the farm in the summertime. Usually June, July, August, you can count on getting multiple pictures here of some good shooter bucks. Every year I've had corn down here. I'm excited to see how this stuff, the summer release, does down here when I'm going to compare that to the corn that I've had down here the last few years. So it is important to note that we likely should have a bachelor group here, but it's also important to note if we lose the bachelor group that they have likely found somewhere else to eat of a more preferred food source. That's the reason that we're doing this experiment. I like corn, I like soybeans, I like alfalfa, brassicas. I plant a ton of different plots, but I have never planted this right here. This, in my opinion, is for soil building. My soil is not great, but it's not at the point where I have to do a lot of building. We naturally have a silt loam around here, 5.3 pH, low to medium fertility. I have rolled the fertilizer to this. This is an important part of this release process. As you hear, it's been 14 years since we put any fertilizer on this farm, since we've been doing the release system. But you have to start with fertilizer. That has to come from somewhere. I think that gets lost in a lot of folks thinking that they can just come out, spread the release system, and never have to put any fertilizer down. It's not the case. This soil is phenomenal as far as the fertility goes. I have absolutely rolled a coal to this field. My phosphorus levels are over 400 pounds per acre down here. Potassium somewhere in the 300 pounds. We have a lot of soil fertility in this plot. So I'm expecting these to do well. I did put 175 pounds of nitrogen down because I was planning on planting all this in the corn. Then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna switch this to summer release. So I have put a pile of nitrogen out here, enough to raise an entire corn crop. It's gonna be interesting to see how this does down here this year. It should see amazing amount of growth with the amount of fertility that I have given to this, so long as we get the summer rain. Trophy rape, smart radish, buckwheat, black oil sunflowers, grain sorghum, iron and clay cowpeas, soybeans, mung beans, and sun hemp. That is the release system. Extreme high density deer zone here. Always have an issue with overgrazing. I actually put a scarecrow down the other end of the field where all the corn's planted, just because I want to keep the turkeys, the crows, and the deer away while this corn kind of gets established and gets going. Excited to bring this experiment to you guys. I think this is something that we can all learn from and see if this is something that many more of us need to be using, or if this is more exclusive to those guys who have very poor soil. So here's the mix. A lot of sunflowers. I see a few soybeans, see some sun hemp in there, but a lot of sunflowers. This ground has been disked 3 times. It is absolute powder. So I'm going to spread this right on top of the ground, and then we get this 1 inch and 2/10 that's coming tonight. We've got several rain chances in the forecast for the next 4 or 5 days. I feel confident that these seeds will just suck right down into the ground as soon as that rain starts falling. with no-till on these bigger seeds, if you're throwing it on top of the ground, you don't have a lot of cover on top, you can really struggle to keep that moisture covered while that seed does its thing. So what happens, that seed sits on top of the ground, it starts raining on it a little bit, gets wet, starts the germination process. But if you don't have 2 or 3, 4 days of rain, moist, wet conditions, or something that's laying over the top of it to keep that moisture there, sun pops back out like it is now, and then all of a sudden it starts drying it down, and it dries it down before that root can get in the ground and tap into the moisture, and ends up killing it. So that's why it's really important to try to time anything that you're broadcasting on top of the ground right in for rain. It really makes it work so much better. We definitely will have soybeans, corn, a lot of different food plots in and around this area. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this plot stacks up against some of those big food plots that I really like, the more preferred stuff. I'm trying really hard not to have any bias here. One thing that I don't like about this system, I'm just going to be honest, is mixing a lot of different broadleaves and grasses always leaves you with nothing that you can spray. No herbicides that you can spray, and that makes me nervous. We have a very high weed and grass seed bank here, and it just makes me awful nervous. Think about trying to plant anything at all and not having any herbicides to use. So we are 5 days after sowing the release plot, the release system, down here in this little corner nook of the field. One thing that's really important to note, when you are broadcasting like this, as I am on conventional tillage ground, it is very important that you put a little bit more than, if the rates say 20 to 30 pounds, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bump that to 40 to 50 pounds. And the reason for that is, when you start throwing seeds down on the ground, you're gonna have a lot of wildlife that keys in on them quick, especially if you have sunflowers. And in this release system, that is a major ingredient in this system, is sunflowers. All birds will just absolutely flock to sunflowers being thrown on top of the ground. So you really have to be careful when establishing these and not try to stay at the bottom end of that rate, because by the time you actually get your final stand, you may be well below what you actually wanted. So in this case, I planted more. I planted about 30 pounds, and I'm gonna say this is somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4 of an acre. I don't think it's any more than 1/2 of an acre. And I've got a pretty decent stand out here, but I have a lot of evidence of turkeys and birds being out here. And I'm sure they're picking off these sunflowers one by one. So we planted this, we literally got rain that day. This stuff should have been off to the races. It got as good of a germ chance as what you can possibly get, but we're already dealing with grass pressure. I can already see some grass out here and a few scattered weeds, nothing too major on the weeds yet, but definitely starting to see grass pressure. And that makes me a little bit nervous. If this was, you know, the field behind us here is a conventional worked, same ground as this, same work, same fertilizer in a cornfield. Well, that's Roundup ready. So I can hit that with Roundup here in 2 weeks and clean all that back up. I'm not gonna be able to do that here. There's nothing that I can spray here because I have mixed grasses and I have mixed broadleaves. I think the hope is that everything just grows fast enough, it just kind of shades itself out. Then eventually you kind of get a mat going as the cereal rye, you down it for the spring to plant your summer release into. It's a whole system that you're working with. But starting out, as I am right now, I'm afraid weeds and grasses are really going to be a concern. This would be something that would really benefit a lot of people if this system was as good as that system. So that's why we're going to compare these. We're putting these side by side, and we're not only going to do this over the summertime, because really the summertime doesn't make any difference. We all love to see those bucks in velvet out there eating in our fields, but what really makes the difference is the wintertime, the fall and wintertime when we're out there hunting. We've all seen those stories. We've all had those trail cam pictures of those absolute hammers that we can already picture on our wall, and we're seeing them in July and August, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, as soon as season comes in, I'm fixing to have this record deer on my wall. And early October shows up, late September, he's gone and he vanishes, not to be seen again until next June, July, and August. And he's just using you as a summer feed pattern. So this experiment is not just for the summer. This is for the longevity. I'm going to keep up with this. I'm going to run a camera on this in the field, on that in the field, and we're going to put this to the test, and we're going to see how this stacks up against a food plot that I really like. With my corn, what I'll end up doing is I'll go in on my corn and I'll plant my brassicas, and I'll plant cereal grains, and I'll plant my annual clovers. So I'll have all that mixed in to my corn food plot on this end, and then I'm going to have the release system on this end, and we're going to see head to head, toe to toe, we're going to see how this stuff shakes out against my favorite plot. Okay, one thing that is somewhat concerning as I walk through the stand and I look to see what we've got, I see very few sunflowers and soybeans. I'm seeing cowpeas, I'm seeing sun hemp, I'm seeing the radishes, seeing all that stuff, but I'm not seeing very many soybeans and sunflowers. And that was a fear of mine going into this, is being overgrazed. Deer know what they want to eat. And when you plant a field, a small field full of soybeans, or even a big field, soybeans and sunflowers, deer can absolutely wipe them out in a hurry. Usually when you have optimum conditions such as that we have had, usually you're looking at untreated soybeans being out of the ground in 3 days, maybe 4 at the most. This has been 5. I should be seeing soybeans out here, and I'm only seeing a handful of them. Only thing that makes sense to me is that the deer are already wiping them out as soon as they come up. They're kind of browsing around some of the things that they don't eat as hard around here, and they're keying in on those plants that they really, really like, such as soybeans and sunflowers. This just looks like a horse arena right now. That's about the best way I can describe this. You know, if you ever been to a rodeo, the ground's all fluffed up, and then at the end of it, it just looks trampled everywhere, and that's what this ground looks like. It's just absolutely trampled down. So I think we have had a big amount of deer come in here, and I think they have wiped out most of these soybeans and the sunflowers. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Y'all smash that like and subscribe button.